What you've been focused on, though, is really interesting. And that's about the actual review of the Epstein files that the government has done. This idea of a truckload of documents. What did you find?
Yeah. Well, there was literally a truckload.
Literally.
When Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, said late February, March of last year, that there's literally a truckload of documents of evidence that was delivered to her. She wasn't joking. The documents revealed there was literally a truckload. And so for me, in addition to writing, reporting out, investigating the stories around the key public figures and the wide range of individuals in Epstein's orbit, I'm all about process as well. How did they do this? What was happening behind the scenes? How are they reviewing these files? And I started searching all records, if there were any, from last year. And sure enough, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pages. And I poured through all of them. And it was really fascinating to see how early on, how chaotic this was. This was not a smooth operation by any means. It was chaos inside the FBI and the Department of Justice as they were reviewing these files. So prior to the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act in November, if you recall, they were getting ready to, potentially release these documents as promised. Ultimately, they didn't do that in July, but as they were reviewing them, you had agents and document reviewers begging for guidance. They had no idea what to redact, what to withhold. They were discussing in these emails, we have pictures of celebrities, presidents, plural, Secretary of State. What do we do with this? So the records I highlighted really kind of make you feel like a fly on the wall as they were, plowing through these documents.
I guess what's really also troubling, I'm always curious about how they decide what to redact and not, especially when there's been lots of reports about victims' information or a shot of a license or something. And so to me, that seems like 101 in terms of what do you protect? So is it just chaos in the office that there's not a set rules? Nobody's really in charge saying, hey guys, here's how we do it? Because my understanding, it's a massive team that's going through this, right?
Right. Yes. No, you're absolutely right, Carol. So what was happening is they just didn't know what to do at the beginning. It evolved until they were eventually told, what to redact. And as I reported last year exclusively, I mentioned that they were redacting these records in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and civil court procedures. And sure enough, that the records show that that's what they eventually did. It was this hybrid of using the exemptions under the Freedom of Information Act to decide, withholding information on privacy grounds and other means. But what we see here is literally there are emails that say, should we redact? There's child porn, child sexual abuse material in here. Should we redact that? Like they didn't even know. I mean, it's deeply troubling to read this. I want to make that clear. So to answer your question, they just had no idea what to redact. And one would think like, yes, you want to redact that, but they had to ask that question.
Well, I just got it. Tim was just like,
the JP Morgan thing.
The JP Morgan thing. So the name, and they take out JP.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to me, I tried to get an answer to this and could not get an answer. And by the way, the entirety of this document, right? The JP is redacted throughout the document. To me, that seems like somebody plugged something into AI. I can't imagine a body sitting behind a computer screen just redacting.
But let's
the JP.
extrapolate that a little bit, Jason.
Yeah.
So the prompt there would be, and I don't, we're not gonna. Like, I just have trouble understanding. Like, they're looking for the name JP somewhere, or a J near,
or the initials. It could be the initials,
Okay.
JP. I mean,
Okay.
it's what's interesting also is that there are training slides that I found that showed, it instructed them how to redact using Adobe Pro. Which is a story in and of itself, but that's what they were using to redact. So one would, assume that they were plugging, terms into, not necessarily Adobe Pro, but maybe, and getting the initials in there, and it just redacted everything.
Well, Jason, why would they redact certain names and not other names? Like, what takes it to the level of redaction? Like, Steve Tisch is an example of a businessman this week who was seen in there. Dr. Peter Attia, I mentioned, their names weren't redacted, but some other names likely were, because we see that in the documents. Yeah,
well, that's a great question, Tim. So what I found in the records that I looked through were emails that described how document reviewers were actually given a list of names early on. There was a list of victims, and by the way, when the documents reveal that early last year, there were 1,100 plus victims.
Wow.
So they were constantly getting a list of names of victims, but then there was also a list of public figures whose names that they would redact. After the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which dictated not only that the Justice Department had to release all the records, but it actually dictated the parameters by which they could, what could be withheld and what should be disclosed. They had to go back and kind of re-review these records and lift many of those redactions. And that's of the public figures and names like, Tisch that you mentioned.